Senior Account Manager for BB Clark and Myler. We worked on the Chic Hydro campaign that Jen Yamoa spoke about earlier.
Yeah, hi, I'm Rob from PopShorts, and I work with influencers doing production, and we're a technology house behind selection of them.
Awesome. So I just want to start really basic and kind of answer the question of what is a social media influencer? So I want to really dig into what are the qualities of a social media influencer and what would a brand or client look for in a really solid partnership. Michael, if you wanted to start.
I mean, I think how I describe influencers, like a blender or a broiler, they do exactly what they're called. They influence others, and I think that is a huge differentiating factor when comparing them to, well, what's a celebrity? And I think with celebrity, there's implied influence. You're not necessarily looking at a celebrity to influence others. You're really looking at them because, well, they're a celebrity, they're famous. Whereas an influencer, you can define them by the fact that no matter what platform they're on, whether they're just on Instagram, whether they're doing a podcast, they still have that influence over others.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're probably an influencer, maybe even Gabby's an influencer, maybe not, no, I'm just kidding. We're all influencers to a varying degree. And it really comes down to looking at who's contributing significantly to the conversation and who's replying to that. Social media is social for a reason, so if you can figure out who's engaging with their audience more, you can usually find who's more influential.
Yeah, I think wrapping your head around the changing definition of stardom and celebrity and fame is really interesting. I mean, I'm sure maybe today we mentioned PewDiePie is one of the top subscribed YouTubers on the network, and he actually has 40 million YouTube subscribers. And just to kind of put that in context, that's a larger audience than the Twitter handles of Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, the White House, and also the POTUS Twitter, all combined. They actually don't even reach half of the audience. So how do you guys feel like the definition of fame is changing? Is it merging? What does stardom of tomorrow actually look like?
Convergence. No, completely. It's a marrying of the two worlds. I mean, you can talk about it from the social media influencer going in, breaking through into Hollywood, like Marcus Johns in the movie Expelled, or you could talk about it vice versa with Steve-O building out a Snapchat account, becoming one of the most influential Snapchatters available. So I know it's really exciting to see the two worlds becoming one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that with some of the platforms that you're seeing, there's ones that you've never even heard of, and yet there's people there's people on there, talent on there that's commanding millions upon millions of followers. And it's like, well, not only did I not even know that this platform existed, I didn't know that there was millions upon millions of people already watching it. How has this been here for so long without me even hearing of it in the first place?
Yeah, I don't think you can really talk about social media influencers without talking about the platforms themselves. And I want to touch on, what do you think social media platforms have that's different from like television or cinema that really draws millennials into it?
I think I've heard the word authenticity throughout the day, and I think that definitely rings true. And I think a big part of authenticity is real-time, real-world interaction, being able to know that you can actually interact with someone who may be considered an influencer in a pretty meaningful way, as opposed to just writing them an email or tweeting at them. We're starting to see influencers who are using platforms that are able to allow for such hardcore interaction. It's like you're not only just talking to them, you're with them, you're doing what they're doing.
Yeah, just to chime in, it's before it was a passive relationship between the media consumer and the medium, but now it's a very active relationship, so you can actually get involved. So as an audience member, you can feel like you're participating, and you can get excited, and you can be a troll if you want. I mean, you can be whoever you want to be.
Yeah, I think the engagement part, the actual participating, is also an interesting topic, because generally a lot of people think of new media internet space as a place where 90% of people are just observers. They only consume the content and don't actually contribute or create anything of their own. Do you think that millennials have like kind of a different spin? Are they actually engaging more than was previously typical?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think with so many platforms that are readily available to everyone, millennials especially, they're able to document just about anything, and each one has a certain hook. So if you're looking to just share recipes or classic cars or band photos. Like you could just use Pinterest for that. I think each one allows for to each of their best abilities, basically. And I think as we go forward, there's only going to be more opportunities to do that.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's a content creator. So, the fact is you're not getting 1.5 billion views on Vine daily just from people being passive. You have to have active content creators out there pushing content and having fun with it. I mean, on Snapchat, I'm not necessarily the quote unquote, I'm not a celebrity by any means, not even close. But I had a great time cataloging what's going on in my day so my friends back in California can see what Rob's doing on the East Coast with his life.
Yeah, I think the diversity of content is also a really important thing to note, whether it's unboxing videos, which are really popular, or watching people play video games, or just general vlogs, daily life, really sharing your day-to-day activities is really interesting. And I think it also, speaking to the platforms, how much it changes by platform. So for example, Snapchat is kind of where you share your little in-between moments, whereas Periscope or Meerkat are examples of apps where you're literally live streaming every second of your day as it's happening. Do you see, what is the tension there when you're obviously curating your life for Snapchat or Instagram versus sharing everything on Periscope or Meerkat? And how would a brand decide which platform to kind of land on?
I think it's all curated to a certain degree. I think just because that you have platforms that are allowing for live streaming doesn't necessarily mean that they are completely uncurated or uneditable. I think that there is a thought process that maybe needs to take place a little bit earlier in the process as opposed to after the content is already created, but actually like before you flip your phone and start recording. And I think brands generally just they don't need to take a back seat and let the influencers go wild with the creation of what they want to do. But I think it is like an ongoing process, and I think it's just a matter of how early that takes place in the let's just say like the pre-production process.
Yeah, I think that starts to touch on kind of the authenticity issue that has been talked about throughout the day. Rob, did you kind of want to touch on what does that mean? What is the authenticity issue in the social media space?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, this is definitely a qualm that a lot of influencers have is, hey, let me just use you for your distribution. Let me just use you as, again, a faceless object that has millions of views as a channel. But in reality, the best brands are the ones that really are doing three things, which is doing their homework, first of all, looking at the influencer strategy holistically, talking through all levels of the organization, even the C-level, so that there's no competing voices, that you're all on the same course. The second one being that you're working with influencers as your co-pilot. If you ever use Waze in LA and you're trying to navigate that traffic, literally they are your Waze. So try and use influencers in a way that is collaborative, as was discussed earlier. And the third thing is that with social media, it's social, so you're getting an endless feedback loop, which is awesome. So you can do iterations to your strategy so that it is coming off as an authentic piece and it's not gimmicky or nor forced.
I think if you distill, if you're able to explain what one influencer does in 10 seconds or less, and able to say, this is what they do, this is what they're best at. I think brands just need to think before going into it, how is my involvement going to enable them to help them do their best, to help them do what it is they're best at, to help them achieve what it is exactly that millions of people or less than that are following them for.
Yeah, I think kind of what you're both touching at is that it needs to be mutually beneficial for both parties. And I'm kind of curious what you think that content actually looks like. So do you imagine influencers, taking over a brand's channel and doing content on the brand's channel, or is it more of a situation where you kind of do like the product placement or like join in a hashtag campaign? What do you think is kind of the best way to approach that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've seen it across the board. You know, different verticals have different strategies. You know, if you're in the theatrical space, you have different movies coming out. So doing those, you know, one-off pushes around the release and around the home DVD release is essential. But if you were to build out your account for, say, the Titanic, I mean, the Titanic 2 would be kind of weird. So, you know, it's not necessarily sensical. But then you have, you know, companies that, you know, are on this endless game of, you know, building that relationship up. So, you know, I would definitely look at it as an investment where, you know, you could work through the influencer, or you could work through your own internal channels, or you use a combination of both.
In the case of Hydro, we really wanted to let the influencer do exactly, you know, what they're known for. You know, we wanted the brand to be a part of it, but we didn't really want it to be overt. We didn't want it to be something that just, you know, just hit viewers over the head, like this was brought to you by Chic Hydro. So through a long process of concepting and working with the influencers directly, we actually ended up creating not only a set of videos for each of the influencers that were pretty much in line with the videos that they were creating, like you asked before, like what makes really good branded content. And I think branded content, I think, is almost, you can almost say that it's at its best when you're pairing it with all the other content that they're creating, and you have to think for a second, well, wait a minute, was this sponsored or not? In working with Hydro, for example, we started off with you know, charging these influencers to create videos that were really in line with what they were already doing, with what they were famous for. But then we also created additional. We created an additional branded version, you know, for Hydro's platforms, it was, like their YouTube and for their Tumblr hub, and that kind of gives you the ability to you know, not only have double presence, but it also helps like hone in on what it's like to work with an influencer and to get good at communicating with them.
Totally. Just to piggyback on that point, there's definitely that collaboration, and you're using influencers potentially, if you don't have a voice, to be your initial voice. A lot of people everyone starts off with no followers on their profiles, so how else are you going to get your voice out there besides paid media, more or less? So that's kind of the initial push or the promotion behind it. Then you use influencers to help in the content creation process afterwards, to keep the content pumping, keep the voice fresh, and then ultimately you want to retain those followers that you've been working to build. So it's kind of like a promote, retain, engage strategy, or engage, retain strategy.
Yeah, I think you guys are touching on kind of the multi-platform necessity of working with a social media influencer. So whether someone found their success on YouTube or Instagram, they definitely have those other social profiles, and they're used in very unique ways. Did you kind of want to speak to, you know, how content plan strategy comes together for, you know, a Twitter/YouTube/Instagram campaign?
I mean, I could speak to emerging if you want to go into the YouTube side.
Sure.
So I think when you're identifying which influencers you want to work with, you have to say, well, all right, well, why are they an influencer in the first place? Also seeing, well, what platforms are they on? How is all of this holistically contributing to them being an influencer? In working with you know, some of our past campaigns, it can be very, you know, even though when we talk about influencers, it kind of comes off as this sort of organic and fast and loose process. In some cases, that couldn't be further from the case. So for YouTube, for example, we were working with Harley, for example, and you know, the nature of the content that we were producing was basically centered around a reveal. Harley's known for his beard. He's known for creating these crazy food concoctions, but he's also incredibly vocal on all the social platforms on being very pro-beard. So the crux of this video is like, we're gonna shave Harley, and it's gonna be crazy because all these people are gonna go nuts, which they did, and he was able to respond to them appropriately, but in working with him, he had to basically go into hiding after the video was shot, because we needed time to edit the video from when he shaved to when it's supposed to launch. And for him to do that, he basically needs to get off all the other social platforms that he's on, like the many ones that I mentioned before, he's on all of them. So if he goes 48 hours without posting anything because he doesn't want to give away the fact that he shaved his beard, people are going to think he died. Like it's that hardcore. So we had to work that into very detailed in the contract itself, having a schedule of when we're rolling out certain pieces of content, how we're teasing that out, exactly how we expect to work with him in creating that content.
I mean, it's a very structured process, and if it's not, then it should be, where you know where things are going to be pushed out, when they should be, when the content reviews are going to take place, that you afford, time in between. But, for example, with The Voice, we were working across, for NBC Universal, we're working across their Instagram, their Vine, their Snapchat, in the sense that we were using each platform to speak in a different tone, in a different way to its audience. So, behind the scenes is great for Snapchat. So there's a lot of cool footage where influencers are working behind the scenes, hanging out with Adam Levine and just kicking it. Then you also have with that you also have the opportunity to take some really high glossy photos where it's basically makeup for a brand. So you have these really high class photos of the influencers shot with Adam Levine or Shakira at the time. Bless you. Where essentially, you're speaking the right language of the platform. And then lastly with Vine, you're doing these content bits with the contestants that make it fun and interactive, which for Vine being an entertainment platform, how it should be spoken.
Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit about the communities themselves or the audiences / viewers. You touched a little bit about how Harley had to kind of go in hiding almost out of fear of his audience's reaction. What do you think is like a key difference between a social media influencer's community or audience versus like a fandom around a TV show or a movie?
I think it depends. I think you can see certain similarities between the two, depending on the influencer, depending on the celebrity, and certainly there's tremendous differences in the three influencers that we used for Hydro. We had Epic Eats, which was Harley Morenstein. For Epic Adventure, we had this Devin Supertramp. You could see that for Devin Supertramp, he was getting tons and tons of likes, but not as many comments as Harley. And the comments that he was getting were all very much like, "Dude, this is awesome," or "Where is that?" or "That looks cool." But with Harley, it was guys basically posting their manifestos, like, "How dare you shave your beard? How one time you said that you were pro beard and now you're not." And and what was so great about Harley is that he was able to engage with these guys and say, look, I've always said, like, opportunity comes along, like, this is what I do. Like he's got swagger for days, and he was able to you can see like different types of engagement there. Like we get asked all the time, what makes a really good influencer? Is it having 1 million followers? And it's like, well, I would rather have an influencer with 1,000 really great, really vocal followers than 1 million followers who don't do anything.
I kind of actually wanted to touch on that point a little bit later, but now is a great time to bring it up. How does a brand kind of decide, do I want to go for the cream of the crop, most successful social media influencer, or is a campaign that involves, a lot of lesser known creators kind of a better option? And how do you make that decision?
Yeah, I mean, it's to varying degrees. I mean, there's pros and cons on each side. You can work with traditional influencers. They're more structured. They have agents generally. There's a very straightforward process behind it. Are you getting the best deal? Maybe not necessarily. There's definitely a premium on them. Sometimes it's just gauged upon how much do I think I'm worth? Well, I think I'm worth this. Cool, let's go with it. But then, at the same time, if you're working with lesser known influencers, or I guess emerging influencers, there isn't as strict of a process, but it's an opportunity as a brand to build a relationship because they are growing and these mediums are getting bigger. So why not work with them at an early age, especially if they're definitely a brand fit, to start building that relationship in and building that trust. And that's all of a sudden they're brand advocates versus just another influencer.
Yeah. So did you guys want to talk a little bit about the best practices of a social media influencer campaign? You know, like how do you roll that out? You know, there's a lot of talk about contracting as well. Like what is the legal backside of kind of developing one of these campaigns?
Get it in writing. Get everything in writing. Absolutely everything. Just if you have a phone call, immediately send an email back that just says, "Hey, I'm really glad we talked about blank," because that could be a starting off point for what eventually makes it into the contract. So you mentioned working with different agencies, MCNs. You know, we're working, even though some influencers may come off as emerging or on their way up, the people who represent them aren't going to be saying that when they're working out the deal or working out the contract. They're going to try and get the best possible package for them. All I can say about it is just you have to have such a level of detail up front. Know exactly what platforms the influencers are on and which ones you want them to present on. So for Harley, he's on so many platforms, but it didn't exactly, he's also on Twitch, but it didn't make sense for us to also promote the program from Twitch because that wasn't what that wasn't part of the brand story that we're trying to tell.
It kind of seems like from a client brand perspective, you almost want to make that field of creativity as narrow as possible, just to kind of be a risk averse, basically. But I feel like a lot of times you hear from creators that they want to have as much of their own creative authority as possible. Did you want to speak on that?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, as far as like narrowing their field of creativity, that's putting a limit on that is dangerous. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you give them. Again, speaking to the earlier presentations, that collaboration is the most essential part of the conversation because they got, or they gained over 1 million followers or whatever it may be because of their unique voice. And then if you try and, sabotage that, then you're going to be sabotaging yourself. So you want to make sure that you're speaking to them in a way that, actually fosters that creativity, but with the brand in mind. I think we were talking about this before. It was just kind of like, if you go into a little bit of the legalities of it and compliance issues with FTC, if you're seeing an ad for, a company, you see hashtag ad and you're like, oh shit, that was an ad, then, you're probably not doing a very good job in that collaboration. So you want to make sure that, you have a very smooth, channel of communication between the influencer. You let the influencer do their part, but it's also you're a marketer, so you want to make sure that you're doing it in a way that's authentic to yourself. So it's just that full balance.
So, I mean, it kind of sounds that you're saying that it needs to be upfront that it's an ad. Like, it needs to be completely obvious, like, this is in collaboration with the brand, and it's up to the creator to kind of decide how to make that still really fun and engaging.
Not to push it, not to scream at someone and say, yo, buy this, whatever, chair, because chairs are great to buy. Like, no, it's not, because it's not like that. It might be witty remarks in the copy that makes it, oh, that chair, you chair. Like something that makes it stand out in a way that's not taking away value and making me feel like I just wasted the dexterity of my fingertip by scrolling through my Instagram feed or wasting 6 seconds of my life through a video. It's actually adding value to the conversation. Like, oh my gosh, that chair with that carpet, that was hilarious. Or, I never thought that would happen. I'm sorry, this is the most inanimate object I could find of anything to give this example to. It's kind of on the fly, but the point being is that if you're adding value to the conversation, then the audience is going to receive that well. And if you're doing it as a brand, you're doing it in your voice. That's great branding.
So as far as brands having a voice, I think there was a little bit of a question on the last few panels of, is a social media influencer campaign appropriate for all brands? I think finance and healthcare both kind of came up as, is this an appropriate place to play in for clients like that? Did you guys have any thoughts about how you kind of find the middle ground between appropriateness and also being, on the cutting edge of entertainment media?
Yeah, you got to be responsible. You can't just go out there and then say, oh yeah, this is so and so perfect for a more conservative client. If you're using fart jokes, for example, it just doesn't. You're not speaking to your audience correctly. You're not doing your homework correctly. So when you go and you do these creative pieces, you want to make sure that, okay, I'm looking at my audience. If I want to talk to an older gentleman, for example, I'm going to probably do so with more respect or a little bit more, maybe tone down some of my language potentially. Same's the story on the platforms. And that's where influencers can help you out, is that if you're working with, say, we worked with Chase Sapphire for, their activation where we're working with foodies. Foodies are a very safe and conservative type of demographic. I mean, it's hard to go too crazy with that. But it related to a specific audience that they were trying to serve for an activation they were doing in Las Vegas with the foodie community. So, bringing in different types of cohorts and different types of demographics that fit in an older demographic, they speak the language, you're going to have, smoothness.
Yeah, so Michael, I mean, working with Harley and then getting him to shave his beard, that's kind of a gutsy move, goes against like his whole brand identity. So how did you kind of come to that decision, this is the right guy, and we're going to get him to do kind of something insane?
Well, Hydro is a challenger brand, and I think Harley is a challenger influencer. We knew going with him that he was going to bring, like his level of comedy, of power to what he does, and he's basically shutting down people left and right, because he had a Vine that he put out maybe a year ago that was, how does a real man shave? He doesn't, and like that was, and people were like, hey, you said this, and now you're shaving, and he's like, well, I say a lot of things. What do you want? Like he just had like awesome, these really funny like one-liners, back, to these, people who are, trying to shut him down, and I think that's something that's, when you're trying to identify like which influencers to work with, something like that is really important. Like how are they able to respond to their communities, to their followers? Are they able to, address people quickly? Are they able to address them, in a way that is most likely going to be in line with the brand? Because in many cases, the turnaround time isn't long enough for the brand to step in and approve every single response that he might have for someone who didn't like his video on YouTube, or who didn't like one of the Vines that was teasing the content. It's something that you just have to keep constantly communicating, and the more communication you have about it, upfront, the better.
It kind of almost also speaks to brand elasticity. So like, can a brand really jump into a conversation before ever having, been on a social platform before? So if a brand is going to collaborate with a Viner, should they already have a Vine account or kind of have sign up an audience there already?
Yeah, I mean, that's an ideal world, but as I kind of mentioned earlier, everyone starts from scratch at one point, regardless of the platform. So, if you don't have any followers, or you haven't considered it, influencers are a great way to kind of get that initial voice out there and that collaboration. Going back to, with The Voice with NBC doing, that promote, engage, retain strategy, that's really helpful to build that stature. But at the end of the day, it's not essential.
So I also want to kind of take some time to kind of futurescape a little bit and think about where this industry is actually heading. So you guys are both kind of familiar with this space, and I'm sure that it's changed a lot in the past few years or decade. Did you want to speak a little bit about the changes you've seen and kind of the trajectory you see it going on?
Sure. I mean, I think it's going in two different directions. I think both forward in the sense of being technologically progressive. I think for every new platform that comes out, there are going to be new influencers who are going to be able to command huge audiences from that. Whether it's now Byte, I think you're also going to see, as we were talking about with like FTC regulations, having to declare a brand. I think we're going to see new types of content formats. Maybe not necessarily video, if it's just animated GIFs, things that will push people into directions where they may not necessarily have to disclose, or at least for a couple of years until the FTC catches on that they are ads. That's what they're doing. At the same time, I think you're starting to see traditional celebrities who I think you could argue are backpedaling, either from circumstance or from just just a general want to be more authentic. Them starting to do things, I think, more in line with what influencers are doing. You're starting to see comedians now who are doing less movie work, either, again, is it circumstance or they're not getting offers, but regardless, they're starting to do podcasts. They're starting to be incredibly vocal, either on the podcasting scene, but also now active on Snapchat. Would you think Gilbert Gottfried would be on, well, he is.
Rob, you look like you're ready to.
Yeah, when you said backpedaling, I just cringed. Like, probably me and the team back West Coast were like, ah. Anyways, they're not backpedaling, they're maturing. Because the thing is, as a star, you look at as a form of media, the consumption habits are going on right now with millennials. It's absurd that Vine, 1.5 billion video views daily for an app that came out 2 years ago. It blows my mind. Snapchat, more than 100 million users. That was a stat from last year, 71% of which are millennials. So if you look at a form of consumption, they're seeing that this is a much thicker piece of the pie than what I'm doing right now. So let me try and evolve my brand, let me evolve my messaging, and become relevant, and maintain my relevance, and keep progressing with these emerging programs.
Do we want one more question? Or okay, Q&A.
Thank you. Just a question for Michael. In regards to doing the research on the audience of the influencer, how much did you know about them, of the influencer's audiences, and what did you know about them? I mean, granted, he had a big beard, so that makes sense. Let's have him shave his beard. But what did you know about the audience, and what did you know about them?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that there's certainly third-party providers that you can go through, like Pixability, for example, allows for heightened targeting abilities to see, all right, well, who are the people who are interested in Harley? And you can see, like, what are the interests? Are these people who also like hockey? Are these people who also like video games? Are these the things that are sort of overlapping with what the brand's research is showing in terms of who their customer base is? I think there's also a grassroots approach, which we certainly do for just about every influencer that we vet. Is we look to see how the average views that their videos are getting, and then going and seeing all the types of people that are commenting on that and looking at their profiles and starting to see, okay, well, because we can start doing that with a variety of platforms to say, even though this person may only have a comparatively small viewer base, the audience itself is totally perfect for this brand. Like, it seems like it could be a total match.
We have to wrap. Thanks, Wes, Michael, Rob. Thank you very much. That was great stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're gonna